Hello and welcome to Business Insider with Mario Toneguzzi on MegaPixx Media. Joining me today is Michael Holden, who is Vice President of Policy and Chief Economist with the Business Council of Alberta. Thanks for joining us today, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
Well, the Statistics Canada released its labor force survey today. Let's take a look at some of the numbers. First of all, let's talk about, Michael, the Calgary region situation. The numbers show that 6,800 jobs were lost in February compared to January. We are down about 6,100 positions from a year ago, and the unemployment rate stayed the same at 10.6% compared to January. What do these numbers signify to you about what's happening in the Calgary economy?
Well, I think what we're seeing in the Calgary economy first, so the job losses that you mentioned there are the third month in a row that we've seen employment decline in Calgary. And so what we're seeing is, I'll talk a bit more about the reopening measures, but what we're seeing is, there's some modest job gains on the service side industries, but it's being offset by a lot of the job layoffs and other challenging times that larger businesses have had. And if you remember, like in the fall of last year, there were several different announcements of mergers and potential layoffs. And I think that what we're seeing is those announcements start to filter through and they're starting to show up in the data. So, and as you said, so the unemployment rate stayed about the same, and in spite of those job losses. And the reason for that is that there are just fewer Calgarians who are looking for work. And so as Calgarians start to give up on what they see as being, flat or poor job conditions, and they no longer start looking for work, and then they disappear from the ranks of the unemployed. So that's why we get these situations where we get job losses, but no corresponding increase in the unemployment rate.
Okay, let's talk about the Alberta situation. Kind of a little different there. Alberta actually gained jobs in February, 16,800 to be exact. However, we're still 71,000 jobs behind what we were last year. And the unemployment rate in Alberta dropped from 10.7% in January to 9.9% in February. So why the difference? Why is Alberta gaining jobs and Calgary losing them?
Well, I think Calgary is gaining the same jobs that that the entire province gained. I think the difference here is that in Calgary we're seeing some offsetting losses in some other industries, and so these job gains that we see across the province are really in these sectors that are part of this forward-looking hospitality set of industries. And so this was, we had some easing of lockdown restrictions last month, and that's what's showing up in the labor market data. So the job gains that you're talking about were almost entirely in accommodation, food services, and other and retail, and these kinds of industries that are the ones that had been shut down by the pandemic and these restrictions. And so as those industries, businesses were allowed to reopen, they started hiring more people on, and that's really where all the job gains were across the province. And then there was offsetting weakness in other areas, like in goods production, especially.
Okay, Michael, we're going to talk a little bit about the national numbers. 259,200 jobs created in February. However, we're close to 600,000 jobs behind what we were a year ago. Interesting point, the unemployment rate nationally fell to 8.2% from 9.4% in January, lowest unemployment rate since March 2020. Have we turned the corner a bit nationally, do you think, in terms of the labor market?
Well, I think you never want to say with any certainty that we've turned the corner at any point. I think that what we've seen across the country is the jobs that you mentioned were almost entirely in Ontario and Quebec. I think Ontario gained about 100,000 jobs, and in Quebec it was about 112, I think. And so that was, again, this is partial reopening measures in those provinces that have created this uptick in employment. And so, there are positive signs for sure, and we certainly don't want to downplay them. And I think that this is all part of this longer recovery process, but there's always a risk. In Quebec there are worries that we might see a third wave, and so we never know for sure if we've turned the corner, but it's certainly a positive sign.
Okay, speaking of positive signs, as we look forward, into the next coming months here in Calgary and region, what impact do you think vaccines, the rollout of vaccines is going to play, as well as the easing of some of the provincial restrictions that have been in place or were put in place in December, right? What impact will those factors have on the employment market in the city?
Well, they'll have huge impacts. And I think those two things, especially since they're so closely connected to one another, are really the most important economic recovery tool that Calgary, Alberta, or the entire country has. The faster we get vaccines into people's arms and the faster we start to reopen the economy, we can start to bring some of these jobs back that were lost.
Yeah.
And so I think that as this vaccine rollout continues, it will certainly help accelerate economic reopening. We'll start to see some of the jobs that were lost come back. And you know, there's some green shoots on the horizon when it comes to mixing my metaphors there. When it comes to some of the new announcements of new tech jobs in the city, in Calgary in particular. And so that's you know, these are all positive signs that we just need to kind of get through this, what is hopefully the last stage of uncertainty, and then move forward.
Yeah, and you mentioned some of these jobs coming to Calgary in the tech sector. We've had a couple of big announcements fairly recently regarding that. How important is that tech sector going to be in the coming months and in the coming years in terms of employment in this city?
Well, it's currently a relatively small industry, but it's fast growing and it's critically important, not just for the tech sector itself, however you define that, but it has all kinds of horizontal implications across literally the entire range of industries in the province. So the more we can build up this kind of an industry, you know, it creates significant new jobs. They're well paying. We have competitiveness impacts across the economy, and it helps to diversify the Calgary and Alberta economies. And so these are exactly the kinds of jobs that we think will help turn the corner in the province. They will take advantage of the skills that Calgarians and Albertans have. And you know, it's one of the more positive signs that we're seeing as this tech sector continues to grow and expand in the city.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks very much for joining us today, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, that was Michael Holden, Vice President of Policy and Chief Economist for the Business Council of Alberta. This has been Business Insider with Mario Toneguzzi on MegaPixx Media. Thanks for joining us today.